our February Technical Commission meeting. We have some material to cover, some material to review, and opportunities for everyone to engage and ask questions or clarifications. Feel free to speak up if you have any questions or you're not sure about something as we start our process in detail. Just a quick reminder before we actually start that when you speak, you will need to identify yourself for the purposes of the recording. So you would just say that who you are, like I said, Commissioner Linker, and then speak. So having said that, let's get a start on the agenda. The first thing on our agenda is a roll call. And for that, we need, Dr. Fair will go through the list of members and ask for present or not.
Okay. Commissioner Laura Austin. Commissioner Jody Autry.
Commissioner Autry present.
Commissioner Kelly Browning. Commissioner Megan Kennedy.
Commissioner Kennedy present.
Commissioner William Cheshire.
Commissioner William Cheshire present.
Commissioner Edward Coggins.
Commissioner Coggins present.
Commissioner Hannah Cook. Commissioner Angela Flowers.
Commissioner Flowers present.
Commissioner Aubrey Gadet.
Commissioner Gadet present.
Commissioner Dawn Hester.
Commissioner Hester present.
Commissioner Hannah Jimenez. Commissioner Renee Kimball. Commissioner Kathleen Linker.
Commissioner Linker present.
Commissioner Amy Marshall.
Commissioner Marshall present.
Commissioner Susan Mills.
Commissioner Susan Mills present.
Commissioner Danielle Morris. Commissioner Stephen Parker.
Commissioner Stephen Parker present.
Commissioner Michelle Perry.
Commissioner Michelle Perry present.
Commissioner Kim Robertson. Commissioner Nardi Roughton.
Commissioner Nardi Roughton present.
Commissioner Lindsay Size.
Commissioner Lindsay Sites present.
And Commissioner Rosalind Yaris. Okay, so you do have quorum.
Okay. So the first thing on the agenda of our official business is would be the approval of minutes. And Dr. Fair, I hear a little bit of background noise, and I think it might be coming from you because I think we're the only ones with our mics on. So I'm not sure. I know sometimes when you have two devices recording and showing it, it has a little feedback. The approval of minutes, if you had a chance to look at it, should be in the Google folder with your materials. So if no one has any questions or comments, we would entertain a motion to approve. And then we would need a second on the motion.
This is Commissioner Mills. I make a motion that we approve the minutes as written.
So I have a motion from Commissioner Mills to approve the minutes as written. Do we have a second?
This is Commissioner Kennedy, and I second.
So Commissioner Kennedy gives us a second. So Dr. Fair, if you can do the roll call for us to vote on approval of the minutes.
Commissioner Laura Austin. Commissioner Jody Autry.
Commissioner Autry approved.
Commissioner Kelly Browning. Commissioner Megan Kennedy,
Commissioner Kennedy, approve.
Commissioner William Cheshire,
Commissioner William Cheshire, approve.
Commissioner Edward Coggins,
Commissioner Coggins, approve.
Commissioner Hannah Cook, Commissioner Angela Flowers,
Commissioner Flowers, approve.
Commissioner Aubrey Gadet,
Commissioner Gadet, approve.
Commissioner Don Hester,
Commissioner Hester approves.
Commissioner Hannah Jimenez, Commissioner Renee Kimball, Commissioner Kathleen Linker,
Commissioner Linker, approve.
Commissioner Amy Marshall,
Commissioner Marshall approves.
Commissioner Susan Mills,
Commissioner Susan Mills, approved.
Commissioner Daniel Morris, Commissioner Stephen Parker,
Commissioner Parker approves.
Commissioner Michelle Perry,
Commissioner Perry approved.
Commissioner Kim Robertson, Commissioner Nardi Roughton,
Commissioner Roughton approves.
Commissioner Lindsay Sice,
Commissioner Lindsay Sice approves.
Commissioner Rosalind Yaris. Okay, all commissioners in attendance have approved.
Okay, and the next thing, just a quick reminder that will be routine. So it'll also be on the files, in your files on the slides after we finish. So if you'll go to the next slide, Dr. Fair, is our meeting norms. We talked about that briefly last time. So just a quick visual reminder for all meetings, to be ready, to mute yourself if you're not talking. Be present. Like I know I personally had to go pull up and close out my school email because it dings in the background, and cut my phone on mute before we started because it's a distraction. And participate. So you need to identify yourself when you speak. That's I said to begin with. You need to comment or ask questions is needed. We do need because we're virtual and not face to face. We do need to have a record of participation, and the way that would be if you participate by making comments, then we have a record of participation in the transcript in the comment that you made a comment. So if it's just a comment that you agree and don't have any questions, we really need to hear from everybody at some point throughout the presentations that we're going to see, and then the discussions that we're going to have at the end. So please take a moment to make a comment, ask questions, any clarification that you might need, especially if you're new to the process or it's been a while since we've had the process and you have any questions. So we really need that documentation of participation. And that is the way that we provide that documentation in a virtual only setting. So the next thing, we do have a presentation from the attorney that represents the Board of Education, the ethics training. But before that, I want to point out that we have in our folder 2 documents. One is the document specifically about attendance, and that's why we have the reasons of participation, and the only way that we know that we're participating actively is if we make comments. And so if you want to refer to that, it does let you know that we are required to attend a certain percentage of our meetings that are public meetings in order, that's part of our obligation and commitment to the board. So if you have any questions about that, you can ask now, ask later, but Dr. Fair did put that in our folder for your reference. So before we begin with our ethics training, do we have any questions? Dr. Fair, is he present, or is she present, the attorney?
Yes, she's present.
Okay. Would you introduce her for me? Or for us?
Yes, commissioners, you have Ms. Allison Schaefer, the SBE counsel, to present to you the annual ethics training that's required for commissioners.
Welcome, Ms. Schaefer. Ms. Schaefer is new to her role and is doing an awesome job already. I kind of looked at the slides ahead of time. Very thorough, I might add. So welcome to the Textbook Commission.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you, I don't know if you want to see me or not, but I think
We
that my
can
video
see
is
you.
on.
That's totally up to you.
Okay. I do have you, I do have my video turned on, but welcome to, thank you so much for the welcome. I am Allison Schaefer. I am the new General Counsel for the State Board of Education. Camilla Fair is going to run the PowerPoint. Just a little bit about my background. I have 35 years of experience working with public schools, both as a private practice attorney for 12 years and then as general counsel for the North Carolina School Boards Association. So these topics are ones that I have covered numerous times in my prior roles for local boards and superintendents and other groups that work with them. So that said, I hope I'll be able to answer all of your questions, and I'm going to briefly go through this PowerPoint to make sure that we stay on time, and we will end at 1:45, but I want to make sure your questions are answered too. So my purpose today is just to give you a brief overview of the public records, open meetings, and ethics requirements that you need to be aware of and comply with as you fulfill your role on the Textbook Commission. And by the way, I commend you all for your public service on this board. It is very important, and I know that you all have lots of other work to do. So again, we're going to talk about public records, open meetings, and board ethics requirements. If you would go to the next slide. The public records requirements are found in Chapter 132 of the General Statutes, and I'm going to, as I said, briefly review those requirements. Next slide. The main thing to know about public records is that anything that is in any documented form becomes a public record and is available to the public unless it is protected from disclosure, by some particular exception. So I like to say, if you write it down, they get a copy. If you record it, they get a copy. Everyone in the world gets a copy. Anyone in the universe who wants a copy of it gets a copy. So be cognizant of that as you communicate back and forth about your work, that these are all public documents that need to be saved and archived and recorded. And if you're using the system through if you're using any emails that come through the Department of Public Instruction or to the State Board, those will be recorded automatically. But if you are not if you're using your personal emails among each other, then those are also public records and need to be sent to the department for recording. But you can see pretty much everything here is included: documents, papers, letters, maps, etc. Anything that is made or received in connection with the transaction of public business. So anything that is in a recorded form: electronic data, sound recordings, photographs, anything like that. Next slide, please. So there's some things that we just put down some examples for you. Text messages would be included. So again, be cognizant of that as you use text messaging, that those are public records that can be requested and must be produced. Any reports, schedules, agendas, anything like that. Again, if you write it down or if it's recorded, then the public gets a copy. Next slide, please. Okay. What are exceptions? And I'm going to just talk about the ones that are particularly applicable to you. Written communications from any attorney that represents you to you all. If it falls within the attorney-client privilege, is not generally open to the public. That basically is from me to you, not questions to me, but advice from me that is legal advice. I don't think that probably happens very often with the Textbook Commission, but it's only when legal advice is given, and that is not disclosable. And if you disclose it, then you will have compromised that privilege. And so it's important that if you get written legal advice or recorded legal advice, that you not disclose that to anybody else outside of the commission. Trade secrets can be included in the materials you receive, and that's another area where you might have some duty to protect. Settlement documents and lawsuits, and if there's any other issues besides basic personnel information. But again, I'm not sure that you will necessarily have that. Information technology security features, passwords and all that are not divulged. Are not divulged either. So there's some things that you need to be aware of. If you have a question, I'd be happy to be available to answer that, and you can just send that through Ms. Fair, and we will get those questions answered. Next, please. Other things that are confidential are specific student files, juvenile court records, special ed recreation records, those sorts of things. But again, I don't think you probably see most of those in the context of your work. But if you have any questions, keep this list available. That is not public, and you cannot disclose it. It's not just a question of also you keeping the public records, it's also making sure you don't disclose them. Next. Anyone, as I said, who requests records can get access to them. There's no authority on the part of the department or the state board to ask why they want them. It really doesn't matter, and they get access to them at reasonable times and under reasonable supervision, in any format they ask for it. So if you send an email, they can get it emailed to them, paper, recording, that kind of thing. Next. And we have to respond relatively quickly. If you are asked to produce information that may be unique to you by the department, then that needs to be done in a pretty reasonable time within a few days. Next. Verbal information, if it's recorded, if it's recorded in a sound recording, has to be turned over. But if it's just a discussion among yourselves, then, and it's not recorded in any way, then that's not produced. So you just need to be aware that if you have a conversation with someone, that's not part of the public records because there's no records. If some records have confidential information in them, then the non-public part has to be taken out. There is no obligation to create a record that doesn't exist. So just so you know, the only thing that matters in this particular case is records that already exist. Next, please. If you have any information that is not coming to you from DPI or the state board personnel, then you would need to forward those things to DPI for their records, if it's about the business of the textbook commissions. If people want to ask for public records, there is a format for doing that. It goes to the Department of Public Instruction Communications Department, and then it will be collected there. Next. Again, we can have sanctions if we don't produce records, so be aware that it's an obligation. Next, please. Okay, so the next subject area we want to talk about briefly again are what your legal responsibilities are with regard to the open meetings laws. The open meetings and public records laws are considered to be the sunshine laws. That's what they're called in many states. Basically, the press gets access, the press and the public get access because we are conducting the public's business. Next, please. All meetings of the textbook commission or any other public body you might be a part of are open to the public if and when the public body meets. And as you can see, that includes any commission, including board authority, other advisory groups to the Board of Education, to the State Board of Education would be included here. Next, please. That means your meetings have to be open and available for any member of the public to attend and listen to. And you also must post the meeting and allow people to know when the meetings will be held so that there is access to that. The State Board of Education and its committees are examples, but if you see other examples within DPI, include the Textbook Commission. So you must follow these laws when you meet. Next, please. Official meetings are defined as any meeting where a majority of the members are gathered to discuss the business of the commission that they're a part of. So your admission, your role can be legislative, policymaking, quasi-judicial, administrative, or advisory. And any meeting of any group that is advisory to the board, such as this, has to conduct all its business in the open. And that would include if you have subcommittees, committees within your group that meet to discuss things. Those meetings need to be posted and available for the public as well. It does not matter how it's held or when. If they're electronic meetings, they need, or in-person meetings, or on telephones, they still need to be available to the public, and you have to do minutes and all that kind of stuff too. Next, please. So the public notice is required, and the purpose is to let anyone who requests that information to know the date, time, and location of any meeting. Again, if it's an electronic meeting, there has to be a means by which the public can gain access to the meeting, whether it's a place to listen or an ability to look at the website for streaming or whatever. There are different lengths of notice depending on what type of meeting you're holding. A regular meeting, you're supposed to have a schedule that's published at least 7 days before the first meeting on the schedule. Special meetings will be, if you have to get called together for some special issue, you need to give at least 48 hours notice to the public of that. And then emergency meetings are those in which there's a crisis and you need to be called back together for that meeting, for that emergency specifically, and all you can discuss at that meeting is the emergency. This applies to things like in school systems where there may be a hurricane coming in and they need to address that, or something happened and one of the schools is not usable, but those kinds of things. You have to keep minutes. They have to be kept and made available to the public, and they have to be written, or they can be written or they can be recordings, but they should be reduced to minutes, such as you just approved. And they have to, the bare bones minimums is to reflect just what actions were taken. Closed sessions are a little more detailed, but we probably don't need to go into that. Next, please. Procedures during the official meetings. This is about closed session. If you go into closed session, you have to have an official meeting. You only have 3 kinds of meetings, as we discussed: a regular meeting, a specially called meeting, or an emergency meeting. And you have to be in one of those 3 when you're meeting. And then within those meetings, you can go into closed session to discuss confidential information. And we talked about what is confidential already a little bit, but student records, attorney-client privilege matter records, certain contract-related matters, and trade secrets, those kinds of things. Next, please. And if you hold meetings that are improper, anything you do as an action can be invalidated, and there can be a court order to stop you from proceeding with those things. So again, it's just important that the public and the press are treated as they are required to be under the open meetings law. Next. These are some resources that are available to you in case you want to know more, but again, I'm always available to answer questions if you have anything specific. And then there's some additional resources on the next page that detail these things more. Again, I've worked with these laws for the last 35 years, so hopefully I can answer most of your questions if you have them. Thank you. Next area is ethics and conduct that you are required to observe. There are a lot of ethics policies and actually criminal laws that require you to be careful not to engage in conflicts of interest as a member of a public commission, such as the Textbook Commission. There are 2 policies which should have been provided to you or will be provided to you by Ms. Fair. I keep doing that. Sorry. That are state board policies that basically set out the requirements for how you have to conduct yourself when you're on a state organization or state textbook commission like this. And again, these policies apply to commissions as well as advisory boards, etc. Those, as I said, those policies should have been put in a folder for you or will be. So let's talk just a minute about what generally a conflict of interest is. It is a time when you are, or a situation when you have, basically you're serving two different groups of people. You can have personal interests, and then you can have interests as a member of the textbook commission. And when those interests conflict is when you have a conflict of interest. And it can be your business interest too. For example, if you work for a textbook publishing company and the company you work for has an interest in a particular action of this committee or will be impacted by this committee, you would have a conflict of interest. And you're required to disclose those, but you're also required to recuse yourself or else basically excuse yourself from participating in any matters in which you have a conflict of interest. You just need to be careful to identify those to the commission and to make sure that you are keep making it clear in the minutes, in the record, that you are recusing yourself. And recusal means not only to exempt yourself from the decision, but to exempt yourself from any discussion of those matters, to basically treat yourself as if you are not a member of the commission for purposes of that particular issue. Again, if you have any question about these, I am happy to field any questions. If you're not sure when you have a conflict of interest, we can advise you on that, and that's part of our work here, and advise you what action you need to take. Again, all members of the board have a fiduciary obligation to the board and to the textbook commission and to the State Board of Education. That means you have a duty of loyalty to do what is in the best interest as a member of the textbook commission for the public schools, and also a duty to be free from conflicts of interest.
Can I interrupt the commissioner?
Yes, ma'am.
Really quick. Just for the conflict of interest, I think in the past we've had a question or two, and there are quite a few new members on board. I know like a conflict of interest with businesses and that sort of stuff. But is it not also a conflict of interest to represent yourself as a commission member when you are not fulfilling that role as a commission member? Does that make sense?
Yes. You mean to use it as a part of your resume or something like that?
No, like to speak on behalf of a topic where you're not necessarily representing the commission.
Yes.
As a commission member. For instance, in my local district, when we talk about textbooks, I don't weigh in on textbook selections as a commission member.
I see. Yes, that would be a potential conflict of interest because you may be acting with special knowledge or in derogation of your duties as a textbook commission member. So that would be where you're playing two different roles, and you need to exempt yourself from playing two different roles if it's going to create I would not use that as a discussion or again, I think exempting yourself from that process at the local level is probably a really smart idea and consistent with the requirements here. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. And thank you for that clarification, because sometimes when we have a hat as a teacher, an educator, or even a parent, not to get those roles, I guess, confused. And so
that's exactly what a conflict of interest is to make sure that it's clear that that you are acting in the best interest of one organization. You might have to exempt yourself from using that information you've collected in another capacity.
Thank you.
Everybody good with that? Thank you. That's a good question. You do have to act without regard to your personal interests or your business interests or your interests as a parent or your personal opinions. You're supposed to be acting as a part of the commission. And so the other thing I think that it's important to do is to understand that when you can or cannot be a spokesperson for the commission, if there is some representation to be made by the commission, you need to make sure that you're not acting inconsistently with that. And again, my experience is mostly at the local board level, but one individual board member cannot represent the position of the board inconsistent with how the board has voted, for example. Everyone's entitled to have their personal opinion, but you have to be careful that your expression of that opinion does not conflict with your duty of loyalty to the board. And so, again, every board member may have an opinion, but the position of the textbook commission is what you voted on, and the position of the commission itself, not your individual position. Okay, next slide, please. One of the areas of conflict of interest is that members shall not use their position for financial gain, whether direct or indirect, for themselves or their families during their term in connection with their service. So what this means is that if you are approached by people who want you to advocate in favor of a position on something you're voting on, a member of an employee of a textbook company or something like that, you need to be extremely careful how you interact with those folks. You cannot, people might try to lobby you, and I think the best thing to do in that circumstance is to say, I can't discuss it outside the context of our meetings or outside of the submissions that you make. You should not be divulging any confidential information that is derived from any submissions to the textbook commission. You should be really careful about listening outside of the context of the commission to anyone who has something that they want to lobby you about. And the step further is you cannot take any kind of financial remuneration. You cannot accept gifts and favors, and we'll talk about that more in a little bit. But there are criminal laws against that, and you can get yourself in serious trouble with that. So just be aware that you should be very wary if you're getting contacted outside the context of meetings by people who have an interest in what you decide. And you should also be careful to avoid any appearance of a conflict of interest. You do not want to discredit the work of the commission, and you certainly do not want to invite folks to criticize you in the public for not staying above all appearance of conflicts. So just be aware of that. I mean, if it's going to create a problem, you want to avoid it at all costs. Okay. Next, please. This board is strictly non-partisan, and the board as a whole is delegated with the role of doing what's in the best interest of the students in the state, and not taking nor supporting a position with respect to any legislative or political matters in your role in this particular commission. Again, if you can have personal opinions about legislative or particular political matters, but you should not tie that into your work with the commission. And you should not, again, be careful about being lobbied outside of the context of your meetings with respect to any kind of legislative or political matter as it impacts your commission role. If you do have or find that you have any potential conflicts of interest or the appearance of a conflict of interest, that should be reported to the chair of your board immediately, so that it can be dealt with outside the context of a meeting. We can advise you on how you need to conduct yourself with regard to a meeting or a particular issue. But again, I'm going to encourage you, if you are approached to discuss matters about the commission's business outside the context of the meetings, that you say, I'm part of the commission and I can't discuss or make promises with regard to matters about the commission, or how I will vote on matters that are come before the commission ahead of time. Okay. Violation of the conflict of interest policy of the board is next slide please, is can result in your removal from the membership of the board. And again, as I said, some of the conflicts of interest policies are criminal matters as well. If you're taking gifts and favors or money or whatever, which I'm sure none of you would ever do, but if you get in that situation, you can be prosecuted criminally. So this is something not to take lightly. Next slide, please. Okay, the other policy that you should have in your packet is the operations policy, which governs conduct, standards of conduct for all boards such as you all. It specifically mentions commissions, which is the textbook commission. Next. The policy requires the higher standards of personal integrity, truthfulness, honesty, and fortitude to inspire public confidence in the public schools. Staying above reproach is critical to people accepting the decisions of commissions such as yours. It's important to avoid anything that looks like a conflict, is a conflict, and to always act in the best interest of the educational needs of the children. Next. Again, this is the policy. I've mentioned this before, but you cannot solicit or accept directly or indirectly meals, travel, lodging, or any other item of value, any favor or reward, or any promise or favor or reward from any group, association, organization, corporation that provides or may be reasonably expected to provide any service, equipment, books, supplies, materials, other products to DPI or the local boards, or has or may be expected to seek any contract, business relationship, or financial relationship with DPI or the local boards, or is subject to regulation or control by the local boards. This would be criminal conduct if you accept such gifts and favors. And I would say to yourself that you can, you're going to get some of this probably offered to you. You can't even accept a meal if someone wants to take you to lunch. You cannot do that sort of things. You can go to lunch with people for personal reasons, but if the business comes up of the textbook commission, you shouldn't even be discussing that with these folks that have this interest anyway. But if for some reason you have a friend who does this, you just need to make sure that, or who works for a textbook commission, that's fine. It's just that you should avoid discussing that with that person, and they should not be paying for your meals. A lot of these kinds of activities are considered to be marketing activities by private companies. Marketing is different for the private sector than it is the public sector. Marketing is fine in the private sector, but it is a criminal conduct issue in the public sector. And most of these companies are used to taking folks out for meals, or giving them rounds of golf, or taking them on, vacation somewhere, or weekends to Key West for a meeting or whatever. You just can't do any of that as a public official. So be really, really careful about that.
Commissioner Linker again, if I can also just ease some people's minds, most publishers are aware of the consequence that if they are talking to you as commission, that could be a reason for them to be disqualified from the adopted list. So most of the time a publisher's not going to approach you with that, and if they do, if you just identify yourself as a commissioner, they'll cease, because they don't wish to be removed from the adopted list, which is a possibility.
Yes. So that's good to know for everyone, and is helpful. And there are consequences for the other folks, for the people who are seeking to provide these services as well, and it's criminal conduct for them as well. So there's also that sanction. Next slide, please. There are some exceptions. If you have a family relationship with someone, you can do things that you normally would have done as a family member. You can accept certain awards, and there are some reasonable compensation approved things, but I think probably most of you, hopefully, are not going to get into that situation, because those particular circumstances would need to be reviewed individually. So if you do have something you have a question about, again, we'll help you with that if you need us. Okay. Next slide, please. There are some allowances for meals, travel, and lodging for meetings sponsored by organizations if it's primarily for the purpose of improving education. Again, that can be tricky if you're a speaker at a meeting, or if you and they pay for your attendance. You've got to be careful about that too, but there are some exceptions for that. So again, if you have a specific circumstance, let us know and we can examine that for you. You just have to be super careful about not accepting items of values from groups trying to do business with DPI. And I think that if you're just have some heightened awareness of that, I'm sure you will be fine. Next slide, please. At the meetings of the commission, this statement should be read, and to remind everyone about the duties to avoid conflicts of interest, and whether any person knows of any conflict of interest or any appearance of conflict of interest, state them for the record, and then bring the matter to the attention of the chair. And then it'll be your duty then, as we said, to abstain from participating in discussion on that matter and voting on that matter. Again, it's a good idea. I know the state board reads this at the beginning of every meeting, and it's a good idea to do this. The Charter School Commission, for example, has people who are representing specific charter schools, or who are from specific charter schools, and if their school comes up as part of the discussion, they routinely recuse themselves from those discussions and state that they, for the record and for the minutes, are going to recuse themselves from those discussions. So again, just make sure the record is clear to protect yourself from any liability. If you do have a conflict, it just needs to be in the record and it needs to be openly stated. Next slide, please. So I am in the process of getting identified as the ethics liaison. Again, it's a process I just got here in January. So there are additional resources that we can provide for you, and there are other. I can provide you with specific statutes and specific citations to those if you need them. But I just wanted you to be aware that there are specific things that are out there that are relevant to this very short presentation. And I do believe I have 1 minute left, and I think that's exactly the right amount of time. So are there any other questions in the little time we have left?
You can have all the time that you need.
Okay. Are there any questions at all? I haven't looked at my chat or anything, but anybody? Well, just know that we're here to support you in the State Board Counsel's office, and that's part of our role, is to make sure that we keep you out of legal trouble, and we advise you how to stay out of legal trouble, and we want you to stay out of legal trouble for your own sakes and for the sake of all your colleagues, and for the State Board. So we thank you again for your service, and it's a pleasure to meet you, although I can't see you, but I look forward to working with you, and we look forward to having a successful relationship. Thank you so much.
Commissioner Linker, thank you, Ms. Schaefer. Very in-depth information, lots of things to think about. Thank you for your time.
Absolutely.
And support.
Absolutely. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Commissioner Linker speaking. So back to the agenda. The next thing we're going to talk about briefly is the operations manual, policies and general statutes. Before we start this, just to give you a chance to weigh in, were there any difficulties accessing the Canvas course, the information that was just reviewed and that we're getting ready to review was in the stuff in the Canvas course that we were hoping that you'd have a chance to look at to make sure that you didn't need any clarification other than the general information that we're going to share to kind of plan ahead of time. So if you were not able to get into the Canvas course, we would need to know that so we can troubleshoot before we meet again. We will be assigning or opening up some other portions of that course before we meet next. kind of give everybody some front load, some information as we start the process of our evaluation. So if there was anyone who either didn't get the information on how to access it or went to access it and couldn't find it, anything that we need to do to know to help troubleshoot that and get you in the course, this would be the time to let us know. If you haven't had a chance to check to see if you could access that course, and should a problem arise, if you would please just contact Dr. Fair. She's got the people on standby at DPI to help if it's something that she can't resolve herself, although she handles 99.9% of everything very efficiently and quickly, always quickly for us. I think most concern would be the non-educators, because you were coming in a different way into the Canvas course, just to make sure that you were able to have access.
This is Commissioner Coggins. I just wanted to thank the commissioners and anyone else who helped put together the course on Canvas. I did go through it last week, and I thought it was very well thought out and very well organized. So thank you very much for your work.
Commissioner Linker speaking. Thank you, Commissioner Coggins. Any input also is for improvement would be also helpful, as those of you that have experienced it look at it, or those of you that are new look at it, that if it's not clear, ways that we could improve. Always looking for positive feedback and ways to improve in that feedback as well. So I'm going with, if you had problems, you're going to let us know later, or if problems arise, you will let us know later as we get more into the process, and we will start looking at the operations manual and the policies and general statutes. So Dr. Fair was going to help with some of that information.
Hi, commissioners. Commissioner Linker asked for me to just highlight some of the things in your operations manual briefly. It is a short manual, and you do have access to that. It is in your folder, and hopefully it'll be your go-to document as you are getting more into your work as commissioners. You will refer to that. It has, of course, as you can see from your table of contents, rules of procedure, information about bid submissions and contact with publishers, things about textbook samples, and then, of course, the general statutes that apply to textbook adoption in the state, and those State Board of Education policies that apply as well. So within your operations manual, you actually have the statutes written out, as well as the board policies written out. You also know that those are available on the DPI website, dpi.nc.gov, and the textbook adoption information. There is a place for the state board policies as well as the general statutes. They are linked through those web pages as well. So you would be able to access them. And then I also offer that if you do have any questions outside of this conversation or this presentation, that you just contact me. You can email me, you can call me, but I would be more than happy if you need some clarification on something to either provide that clarification myself, or to put you in touch with, or to contact myself, someone who can give us clear clarification for those things. So let's start by talking and just highlighting the rules of procedure. There's several rules of procedure, but these are usually the ones that we definitely discuss with commission members on a more regular basis. So I thought I would highlight these, especially for those commissioners who are new. We do always talk about quorum when you all are having meetings, and that is because quorum is required for you all to have a meeting to conduct business. And because the number of textbook commissioners is 23, 12 members are required for a quorum. So in order to be able to meet, a quorum of 12 has to be established. So some of you may have heard Commissioner Linker speaking earlier to me about how many members she was seeing present as participants or as panelists, and that was why, because if 12 members are not present, she would not be able to start the meeting and conduct the business of the Textbook Commission. So when you see polls come out with information about will you be able to attend this meeting, we're also kind of collecting numbers to be sure that the dates are going to be able to provide the needed number for quorum. So it's very important that you also respond to those polls. The chair and co-chair situation, the chair presides at all meetings, and if the chair is absent, the co-chair presides. So in this situation, Commissioner Linker is presiding as the co-chair, and she's also was a member of the subcommittee. She was the chair of the subcommittee that we had, that you all had, and so she also presided over that. Voting also comes up, as you all heard. You vote on approving the minutes. And you vote on other things as well as like adjournment of the meeting. So all members may vote on commission matters, but you must be present in order to vote. So we don't do any voting by proxy or email or text messaging or anything like that. You would have to be present in order to vote on matters of the commission. And just a little tidbit of information about meetings. The commission is required to meet 4 times a year, but the commission can also meet at the call of the chair. So there's some information in your manual about what that might look like or how that may happen. In this case, it's of course the co-chair, who is Commissioner Linker. All right, so the next topic that I'm going to highlight for you would be bid submission. So as you all know, we are hopefully going to be going into some activities that may involve textbook adoption in the future here. We're currently postponed indefinitely, but hopefully, we will get permission and be able to move forward sometime soon. And if that is the case, something that you need to know about bid submissions is that publishers are the ones who are responsible for determining the grade levels and courses for the materials that they present for submission. The materials that they present, the way that they indicate that it needs to be included in the grade levels and courses, that is how you all will evaluate the materials, only for those grade levels and courses that are specified by the publisher. So it's very important that we receive that information in the bid submission, and then that's what you adhere to as you're reviewing and as you're helping the teachers review, the advisors that you have. The publishers are responsible to label their submissions. There are a lot of instructions in the invitation. You all may be familiar with the invitation that we had available for 2020. That is the invitation that's still available on the DPI website on the textbook adoption pages. It has all the information that publishers need if they're interested in finding out what our process looks like. If we move forward and resume the process, of course, we would have an updated invitation for 2021. So I would definitely let you know when and if that occurs. But these details are in there if you're interested in finding out. Some of you may play a role in the actual review of materials that are presented for review. And this would be good information for you to know for being a part of that process. DPI does provide identification numbers to the publishers, and we ask that they put that identification number on everything. Everything that is a component of the bid number should go on each component. So that way, if things are taken out and looked at, that they can go back in the right place, so that you can be sure that you're reviewing for the right bid. So that's all part of responsibilities of publishers. And in addition, correlations are part of the sample. So publishers have to provide those as well. And those correlations basically show the alignment with the standards and the materials. It would show where the standards where you may be able to find the materials that are aligned with particular standards. And that would be a document that you should have available to you that the publisher actually provides. I also want to highlight just a few things about publisher contact. Ms. Schaefer did an excellent job of talking to you about conflicts of interest and also standards of conduct. So this is really just a continuation of that conversation. Publishers do know, many of them who have been a part of our process, that they should not make contact for influencing or attempting to influence whatever happens with the evaluation and adoption of textbooks or programs that have been submitted for our review or for your review. So that would be something that as Ms. Schaefer mentioned earlier, if you are feeling uncomfortable or if someone is approaching you, you should definitely make sure that you let someone know, because that definitely should not happen. Additionally, in terms of publisher contact, things like sampling and piloting and the promotion of textbooks and programs that are under consideration for adoption, meaning things that publishers have submitted in a bid, those things should not be discussed or done from the time the invitation is approved and issued by the state board until the day after the evaluations that you all have with the advisors. And that specifically includes sampling, piloting, and promotion. So materials that are on bid list should not be out there across the state as samples or pilots or any type of campaigns or promotions to promote those materials as something that you should have. So you have several general statutes and State Board of Education policies that pretty much provide guidance and define the work of the Textbook Commission and also the responsibilities of the State Board of Education. And then there are also some general statutes that explain what district responsibilities are with textbook adoptions locally. So I would definitely encourage you to either go to the website and look at those policies and general statutes, or to utilize those that are provided in your manual. It is worth looking over them because sometimes you don't really know until you get into the process what things are happening or what things you need to be familiar with. So now while we're in a postponed status, it would be a good idea to kind of peruse those and take a look at them just to see if you do need any clarification before you actually move forward in the process. The general statutes include topics especially things about the appointment of the textbook commissioners and the evaluation of textbooks. So that'll give you a little bit more detail if you're interested in knowing what the composition of the commission is. I think we've had that information in things that I provided for you, but you would actually be able to see it written out in the general statute. Also, as far as the evaluation of the textbooks, there's also some information given about that. The state board policies provide guidance on various subjects as well. That also includes evaluation criteria, evaluation advisors, and other things concerning the work of the commission. So you definitely would need to look at those state board policies. There's fewer state board policies than there are general statutes, but I would say take the time to peruse each. Those things actually have implications for your work, but they also have implications for how you evaluate and then how the state board adopts. So it'll help you understand the process in totality if you're a little bit familiar. So they're in your manual, but they're also available on the state website as well as on the State Board of Education site. So I offer this slide to you as self-reflection for today with the highlights that I've given, but also in coming days, if you decide to take the opportunity and time that you have to review the general statutes and the State Board of Education policies, I would just say to you, think through these questions. How familiar are you with the rules of order? Those are the things that govern your meetings. How can you gain a better understanding of the guidelines for textbook evaluation, because that is the cornerstone of the work that you do? And then what is the importance of the statutes and the State Board of Education policies in your role? A lot of times, if it's relevant to you, then it's really meaningful and it makes more sense. So it would be great if you do have anything that is not clear as far as how it's important to your work, that you would just let me know, and then we can have that discussion, or I can provide more details for you. And then finally, what can you do if you need clarification? And again, I offer, you can contact me if you need clarification, but you can also, like I said, research on the website and then find the actual statutes and policies and read them in their entirety and just see if you understand them, if you have questions, or whatever the case may be. So that's it for the highlights for your operations manual. So I do want to pause for a moment and see if anybody has any questions for me.
Commissioner Linker, Dr. Fair, if I can also point out that Dr. Fair included those documents that she referred to in our Google folder for your review, as well as it is included in as part of the Canvas course that we published for you to review, along with links to the different website, if that is an easier mode for you to access. Also encourage you to go onto the DPI's textbook adoption website. It is very concise. Again, Dr. Fair is the designer behind that and is very thorough in all of the things that she does. And so you will find everything that you need on that website. And it is also referenced in the Canvas course, as well as documents provided within our Google folder for today's meeting. So you have multiple modes, and I encourage you to reach out to her if you have any questions. I also need to just remind everyone, we do need some comments from people to our documentation that we are attending and participating in this discussion, this meeting. So this would be a great time if you have a question, or if you just want to say, it looks good, I will need to get with you later, or now's the time to ask if you're not sure about something.
This is Commissioner Marshall. I just have a quick question regarding the Google folder. Is that also accessible in the Canvas course?
The folder itself is not in the course. There is a video that Commissioner Jimenez and Commissioner Slice put together that shows how to save it so that you can find it, how to make a link so that you can find it easier, especially if you're like me and you have a huge amount of information in your Google folder. Okay. But we could possibly put a link in the course to the folder. So let me check on that.
Thank you. And just confirming, we have an email that has a link to the Google folder right now. Is that in our email that we would have received?
Commissioner Marshall, I know you joined like mid last year, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I think you would have gotten access to it then.
Okay.
But definitely something that we can make sure that you have when we get off. And okay. I'll look into that. And I'm sure Dr. Fair's writing down as we speak.
Yes, this is Carmela. Commissioner Marshall, I'll definitely make sure that you have either a new email access to it, or I'll send you the link myself so that you have access to it. But I'll make sure that you have easy access to it so that you can save it.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
If there aren't any other questions or comments in the interest of everyone's time, we can go on to the next part of the agenda. Feel free to jump in as we go into this next part. If you have any questions, ask why they occur in the discussion. I'm open to stopping and figuring things out and talking things through as we present the following information, or when we conclude. But again, I encourage people to comment or participate so that we have the record of participation from all members. So the next thing would be the text evaluation process draft timeline. So Dr. Fair, if you can go to the next. Okay. You may recognize this slide. We actually had it in the spring of last year before we proposed that the state board stop the process due to COVID. And so there's not dates to it. It's just the general how the flow of the timeline goes. These are the major tasks that as commission members that we do for our work. And the first, so it's month 1, month 2, month 3, month 4. Traditionally, it is a 4-month process from the time we actually start looking for advisors and getting our materials and until the time that we submit our final written report is roughly a 4-month timeline. I will say that we are proposing to the State Board of Education to resume the evaluation process, hoping for this summer to review those courses in CTE and math that were in the invitation that you currently have access to and that is on the website. We will have proposed changes in the invitation that reflects the new proposed timelines, because that invitation had the timeline for last year, like the dates that the different things would occur, our meetings, the date of the evaluation week, the date of our deliberation and reconsideration. So for some of you, this is not a lot of new information, and for some it is. I will say the next part of the Canvas course that we're going to publish for you to go in to have some other resources to look at will include this type of information. And we did hit on a couple of this shortly, just for a little bit at the last meeting, especially the part about our written report. So the State Board of Education is to consider the changes to the invitation at their March meeting. So we should know by the time we meet in March. We'll meet the week after, within 2 weeks, but I think the week after the State Board of Education meeting. And so at the next meeting, we will know if they did approve our request to change for the dates to start the process for the summer. But that is one reason why you were polled with possible dates for meeting in March and in April, because those dates would need to be included in the proposal, the changes in the invitation. So are there any questions about that part before I get into a little more detail?
I have a question or just clarification. So I'm looking at this in the timeline, month 1, month 2, but we don't know dates, correct?
We won't officially know dates until the Board of Education approves it.
Okay,
So
I'm sorry, I'm Commissioner Roughton. I forgot to say my name, Commissioner Roughton.
We're tentatively planning, but again, it's based on the approval of the Board of Education. So we tentatively have month 1 would tentatively be our March meeting is when we start talking about advisors, and then we will start seeking them out so that when we come back in the April meeting, if it's approved, then we would look at selecting those advisors from the pool. And at that same time, we start talking about our receiving the materials from the publishers, and then we'll start finalizing, starting our report, because our report starts when we have access to the actual materials from the publisher. So we have a almost 2.5 month window to go through the material and do our evaluation. And so that's how we are right now, is we are proposing that the March meeting would start our conversation about hiring advisors. We are planning on having, that would be what we call a content meeting. We've already had the presentation from the areas of DPI that support the process. For this would be the CTE, math, high school math, and the ECEL divisions. Those 4 have made presentations to us in the spring, and I'm not sure, we had some people come on right after those presentations, and so you may have missed them, and so they're going to be available in March meeting. If we get permission to go ahead and our invitation is approved, they'll be ready at the next meeting to answer any questions we have on what they presented to us last March. That information would not change.
Commissioner Perry wishing to speak.
Commissioner Perry?
I have a question. Last year was my first year, and there were, as you know, a lot of hard copied material. Will there be more virtual material possible, or does it have to be all hard copies?
As the invitation is and the process is defined, currently the publishers choose what to submit.
Can we request if they have digital copies?
we do request that they provide that information if they have it, but we don't require at this point all publishers to have it.
Okay, I didn't know, especially due to COVID, some people might be at home, and not at school. I didn't know if that was more possibility due to space and access.
And Carmela, if I may speak, Commissioner Linker.
Yes.
Yeah, I would just say, Commissioner Perry, that as the plans are being made to move the invitation forward to the board, there are some changes that are being considered due to the nature of COVID and social distancing and things like that. So some of those changes are being put under consideration for the revised invitation.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So Commissioner, back to Commissioner Rowden, did that answer your question about the timeline?
Yes, ma'am, it did. It did. So it's still basically up in the air depending on what happens with this, but we're still looking at a good format. But the meeting in March is just to kind of start the conversation.
Correct. Our March meeting is traditionally what we would call our content meeting, and for us it would just be a review because it's the same content as before, and to start the conversation of the advisors that we need to start looking the process for that. And at that meeting we will have the board's approval or input in our invitation and be able to look more deeply into, you know, what does that look like for the samples and when do we need them by based on our timeline and that sort of stuff. I think the hardest thing is we've decided to go ahead and plan as if it could occur because it's so much to pack in that if we waited until May, there's just no way to pull off a June evaluation week in short of a time span. There's too much that has to be planned out for that to happen. So it's better to start the process and not be able to do it than to not start the process and suddenly be able to do it. Does that, if that makes sense?
Yeah, yes, that makes sense. And that leads to, I have another question. Can I ask this?
Sure. Yes.
Okay, so, and I'm trying, correct me if I'm wrong, but I remembered, because last year was my first year, and I thought like the term, is our term up in April, or am I thinking, am I remembering a different conversation? If so, what happens then? Can we continue? I mean, what happens then?
Our term is up in April, and we have been given a form for, if Farrah can jump in if she would like for clarification. We've been given a form for our, if we were interested in continuing on. But it is a 4-year appointment by the governor, so it is subject to change.
Yes, this is Carmela. I would just say that first of all, I do need for 10 remaining commissioners to respond to that form because the governor's office has contacted me because that term the term expires April of 2021, but they always reach out to ask how many of the current commissioners would like to continue, who's interested. So we gather information about interest. Then if there are vacancies to fill, we work with the state superintendent's office because they do make the recommendations for filling any vacant spaces. And that would be the next part of the process. So the first thing that I'm going to need is to hear from the rest of the commissioners who've not responded to the form to do that so that we at least have an idea of who's interested in reappointment and who would not be able to be continue on as a commissioner. So that'll be extremely important. But until there's a resignation or something under those lines, then you are going to continue to be on the commission. You have to indicate whether or not you're interested, and then I forward that to the governor's office and then let you know what happens from there.
I should also say, Dr. Farrah, let me pipe in and say you need to still qualify for the position. So like if I retired, I would not be able to stay on the commission, even if I wanted to.
That's correct. And if you are a parent, then you came on based on having children in certain grade levels. So we would need to take a look at that. I think there was a question in the form about if your role or your qualification has changed. So all of that information in that form is important so that we can move forward, because as we're trying to move forward and maybe resume the process, we do need to make sure that we have the commission in place, because that would, like I said, that would be in April, and we don't want any hiccups hitting in April and not being able to move forward beyond that month. So if you could, those of you who've not responded to it, please do so, and just let me know if you're interested in continuing, if your qualifications have changed, and if you answer yes that they have changed, if you would just put a note about how they've changed so that we can see, how that may work in the confinement of what we already have, or if we have to reach out to others.
And Dr. Fair, could you resend that link so that it's current in everyone's emails?
Yes, I was planning to do that today. I will.
Thank you. You're so efficient. I really appreciate you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you too, Commissioner Linker.
Okay, so very good questions. Now's the time to ask while we have time to look at this part of the details before we get hot and heavy next month. We'll get really busy really quick.
Commissioner Marshall, with a quick question.
Sure.
I was just wondering when we would receive notification if we had been renewed for the next term.
You would get a letter from the governor's office. The
Okay.
when, I'm not sure, but you do get a letter from the governor's office.
Okay.
And
you think that would be in April? Or?
Usually, hopefully it would be before April or about that time, because they would need to replace the people who are can't or do not wish to remain on, so that we have a full board in April.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's why it's time sensitive that we answer Dr. Fair's link so that she can get that information to the governor's office so that they can then get in support with the superintendent's office at Department of Public Instruction and come up with some new people to fill the voids. So if there's not any other questions about the actual, that sort of information. So what our timeline looks like, and when I talk, I'm going to try to remember to say it as if it's tentative, but just know that everything that I'm about to say is tentative to when we start the process back up. But when we start the process back up, this is the general flow for how it goes. And if I leave something out and you're a former board member, commission member, please pipe in and say, hey, well, we did it this way. So when we meet in March, be our content meeting. Again, you'll have some modules within the course that will have some information, but basically it's the same information that we had last March from those areas, those divisions of DPI. We will also in March look at our platform, and when I say our platform, the commission platform, what we use to evaluate material or submissions in, and also we talked about how that ends up dumping into a larger form that becomes our written evaluation form. So that platform, we will have a representative from it's Quacks, correct, Dr. Fair? It used to be called TOPS. I keep wanting to say TOPS.
Yes, they do the same work. They're in the same organizational structure, I guess you could say. Just TOPS works with the assessment parts of things, and then Quacks does some more general work for the agency.
So that's who, with the help of Dr. Fair's input, designed the platform that we started 2 years ago, and they refined it a little bit last year. And we started that right when we stopped the process in March of last year. So you might have got we got the intro but we didn't actually get to log in to see it from our perspective. So we're going to start that again in March. We'll have someone present to start the overview for what it looks like so that we can get access to it, because then the next month, April, that's when we start looking at advisors. We start looking at coming up with potential pool and how many we need and how we divide into regions or districts to select from the pool of possible candidates, and all that will come in April, which would be month 2. Actually, really that's month 1. And then, so that goes on at the same time. The publishers are making their bid proposals. The bid proposals are opened, and then we know how much we have to review, how many submission bid numbers that we have, what the material is going to look like, and then we can start our process, which is on the platform that they're going to show in April. That gives us a chance to see, can you log in? Do you have any questions? How does it work before we actually get the material to start using? Any questions about that part?
Commissioner Linker, this is Commissioner Kennedy.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about the recommending the advisors. I know you said this was something that was vastly approaching. I was wondering how that works. Just to give me an idea, this is my first year of things that maybe I can think of, prior to.
Well, we have a flyer that we've had already fixed last year that, again, dates would need to be changed based on the what happens with the Board of Education's how they approve or change the invitation. And so DPI sends out through their listservs, which is one way they communicate with teachers in their areas of the possibility of this opportunity and a little bit of information. As commissioners, we can reach out and provide the same information, like, hey, this is the date, this is the time. If you're interested, you need to go to this website, and there's a form that they would fill out, their interest form. It's a Google form, and they would fill out that. And that it's not really an application, it's more of an intent. Like, I'm interested in interest form. They fill out that information. It goes into a huge Google form or Google sheet. And the same process, then there'll be we actually have an advisor's course in Canvas that we've also been working on. So we've been doing 2 courses. So that has some onboarding information for them. Dr. Fair oversees that for us for DPI, the onboarding and getting the logistics for that part figured out. Then as commission, hopefully we have this large pool of potential candidates, and then we go in by region and choose from that list a good representation of advisors that we would like to hire, we recommend to hire, to give us that input. And we're proposing that be in June, the middle of June, that's the middle of June. And so how that works is CTE courses are a little different because there's a lot of, they don't call them divisions. Program, it's not, Dr. Fair, what is it called? What's their larger branch called?
They're called programs.
Programs. So within each program, there's so many courses, and it really depends on how many submissions we have for each course as to how many advisors that we need. We like to have at least 3 advisors for every. We really prefer 5. But if there's not a lot of courses, it may be the odd number districts hit these, try to locate these areas, and the even numbers locate these areas. We also evaluate in math 1, 2, 3, 4 discrete math, and there's another one because there's 6 math courses. So we'll be looking for high school math teachers as well. They have to be qualified in their area. All their qualifications are on the flyer. We'll go over that, I think, next time at our next meeting. And once we take the poll, identify the ones that we recommend to hire, then Dr. Fair reaches out to those people and indicates to them that they, are you interested? Here's your contract. And then she does all the logistics behind that. And then we've got some training, some front loading stuff in a course that those advisors would be enrolled in to complete. So it sounds like it's a lot. It's a well-oiled machine. It is going to require that when those dates become due, when we want our pool to be finished by April, because that's our last official meeting if the proposed dates are approved, then that's when we need to sit down and you'll meet with the others in your region and talk amongst yourself. The way we did it last time was the Google Sheet. We had you rank your first, second, and third choice. Because we did have people that came back and said, no, I'm not really interested now, or something's come up and I can't do it. So we had to go to the second choice. The biggest thing to remember about advisors is that we work really hard, and the number one goal is to get representation from across the state and from across the region. So for instance, here in the Southwest, which is my region, there's quite a few commissioners. And so we divided up. There's fewer for us to find because there's more of us to find them for our region. But even though I teach in Rollins-Osbury school system, and I might have 3 people that I know are really highly qualified, I would not hire 3 people from Rollins-Osbury school system. There are other districts in the Southwest region. So we balance that hopefully every district, as close as we can get it, will get one advisor. Sometimes we don't have enough to fill from one and we have to go to another one, another region or another district. But that is our ultimate goal, is to get representation from across the state and from within our regions from across the region. So that, I think everyone that's a teacher could name 10 people in their area or at their school that would be really qualified to do it. You would not hire or recommend hiring those people. You need to pick 1 or 2 per district. Does that answer your question without it being too muddy?
That was a perfect description, because when I saw it, I'm a teacher and I was just trying to get in my mind maybe some things like, should it be, just in my district? But you definitely hit the nail on the head when you said that it needs to be a fair representation across the county. So thank you.
And there are instances when especially the smaller, further out districts and regions, like what used to be the northeast part of the state, coastal part, that region, and then the western mountain part, they don't tend to be as many potential advisors from those areas. And so sometimes we have to go from, if you represent region 1 district, what used to be region 1, you might need to go into and say, hey, I can't find anybody. I'm supposed to find someone who does math 1 and I can't find anybody. And then somebody maybe in the district beside you could say, a commission member could say, well, we have a couple here if you want to, look at one of ours. That's why we do first, second, and third choice. So we have it narrowed down to a pool. And then if we need to share amongst ourselves to fill the void, we can, because we only have a few weeks from the time that window closes before the advisors need to be notified that they've been that we're offering them the opportunity. And we found in the past that it works easier if you work together as a commission. We've got different commission members, and anyone wants to chime in that's done it in the past. We've done it where people have divided up their region and taken different districts, and we've had it where they worked together and met. Well, this is when people were meeting face to face and met somewhere and just looked over the list, just the 2 or 3, because it's not officially a meeting, and said, hey, I'm going to take this school, you take that school. I know this person over here. And just so different people work differently, but you will work with the other commission members in your district. And I think if I remember correctly, I think you've made connection because you were able to attend the first meeting or two, if I remember right, before we closed, right?
Commissioner Linker, I was not able to attend. Somewhere in the midst of the COVID, because I was actually teaching,
Yes.
I completely missed the emails, and there was a big, a mix up. So I appreciate you for clarifying that.
So maybe that's one thing we need to do. I will make that. That's the one thing I miss about face to face is when we're face to face, then you can put a face to people and you can get to know the people in your region.
This is Commissioner Slice. Can I just
Sure
kind of add on to that? I'm sorry. So I was new to it last year, and my region, we actually split up, and each of us took like a separate county, I guess. But there are a lot of us on the commission that have like hands in other regions. So like I know that I can reach out to the Northeast region because I know a lot of people there. So if you're having issues not like finding somebody in your region, email the commissioners because a lot of us know a lot of people across the state. So we may be able to reach out for you and say, hey, listen, you got an email about this. What do you think about doing it? So definitely use us too, because a lot of us have traveled and been in different counties and different regions just throughout our career also.
And we actually have 2 commission members I know that are CTE experienced. And they are very strong networks, the CTE consultants working with the CTE teachers in their respective districts, and they have a lot of connections as well. There are, and the fine line becomes there are some districts that offer some courses and some districts that don't. So it's trying to find a balance of making sure that the courses are even offered in the districts that you're trying to find them for, because they may not be. Math 1, Math 2, Math 3, Math 4, not so much a problem. Are there any other questions about advisors? And you'll get more information as we get closer to that. I just kind of wanted you to see like the overview before we start digging down into the certain specific parts.
This is Commissioner Perry. With CTE, we have a statewide Moodle networking site that we can post that to, but CTE is very networked, so I'm sure there shouldn't be any problem whatsoever because they enjoy stuff like that.
And we were very mindful to not pick times that conflicted with, I know there's a lot of national conventions and things like that in the summertime for CTE and for math.
Yes, I want to make sure we add up. Thank you. I know there's several CTSOs that are throughout June. I'm not for sure about July. I know some of them are virtual, which I know that they're connected pretty good during those times too.
So as commission members, we have the task of finding the advisors and the support of Dr. Fair to run through the logistics and making sure that once we identify the ones that we would like to offer, taking care of that part for us. At the same time, or as one is wrapping up, the next part starting, and that is the submissions of the materials, which starts your evaluation process, because even though the evaluation week is mid-June, that's proposed, the tentative date is mid-June. Again, we worked around some conferences, so it's mid-June instead of the end of June. It needed to be done before July 1st because it needs to happen in this physical year for budget purposes. And so, but before we start the evaluation week, which basically is a week when the advisors look at the materials and then they give us their input on, as experts in their field of the materials. And so, but we still have to do our own report, and we need to do our own criteria for the materials ourselves. We can start our work as soon as we have access to the materials. And it's really helpful, especially when I say this, I'm speaking to as the process has been in the past, and knowing that CTE has been a long time since we have been able to look at their materials, which is why we felt like it's really critical to hopefully be able to at least get this underway in this year, because it has been a long time since CTEs had materials, and their standards change frequently because they are based with standards that are industry based. As well as two of the math courses that we're looking at are newer courses. So it's getting the materials, because our number one calling is to provide appropriate materials to support the students. And so it's very important work that we do. And I guess I should say that I'm grateful for your participation across the state as commission members so that we can take on this work. We don't do it for financial gain. We do it for heart and knowing that the ultimate goal is what's best for kids and materials for the teachers to be able to teach the kids. So that is foremost the most important thing, that we're looking through the lens of getting materials, instructional materials, whatever form it might be, that meet the criteria in the hands of the teachers and in the hands of the students. So the idea being that with the CTE courses, a lot of those are not formatted like traditional sort of courses. A lot of them are hands-on apprenticeship type models. A lot of them have digital components. They had digital components before we ever had digital components. The last time we did CTE was maybe my third year in, and I've been in for 16 years now. And that was video modules. We had DVDs. That's why that's when the commission really started looking more at the digital aspect of submissions, because it's already there. And so I anticipate there would be a lot of digital submissions specifically with CTE, because that's the way the industry is currently. There are still texts and there are still textbooks, and I wouldn't think that they wouldn't be submitted. I have no control over, and nor won't control over what is submitted. That's the publishers. The publishers decide. They have the criteria sheets. They know what they have in their company that could meet that, and they put together a package, and that's their submission bid. And then we evaluate whatever it is they propose that will meet the criteria for consideration for adoption, in a nutshell. So our work can start and should start when we have access to the publisher's materials. And really, when you're looking at different formats, to give us a chance to understand the format and how to navigate and how to find things that we receive for submission. So that is why you see those two long bars, because the first one is the actual evaluation of the samples, which is commissioners and advisors, but the advisors is the end of month 3 to the beginning of month 4 is just 1 week. But we have 2.5 months. We really have longer this time. We have 3 months, because we are proposing to do our deliberation either the end of July or the 1st of August. So we have that long of a time to go through the material, review the material, and as we review the material, we are coming up with our evaluation of it, that then we come together in month 4, we have that little teeny blip, and we participate in what we call deliberations and reconsiderations. So when we come into month 4, we have 2 days. 1 day usually to deliberate, and then if Then we have a reconsideration time period if needed. And then when that ends, those 2 days in, before we leave that meeting, be it virtually or physically, face to face, when we leave that meeting, our written evaluation is submitted electronically. And then the platform's closed. So we have a lot of time built in to get our work done. But our work is the bulk of that timeline that you see there. So when you come into that last two bullets, when you come into the deliberation reconsideration, you're coming in with an idea of what you think of the materials based on what you've looked at personally, what you've reviewed personally, and looking at the input from the advisors that have given their expert opinion as experts in the field. And you're taking that information and you have an idea of how you feel it fits the criteria, and then we deliberate or we discuss it as a commission. And so we discuss each submission number, pros, cons, what we recommend, and then we vote as a commission whether to consider it for adoption or not to consider it for adoption. And then our recommendations ultimately are presented to the Board of Education for their approval, because they're the ones that have the final approval. We're just recommending the Board of Education approves it. So hopefully we will know in March that the timeline for sure, the dates of the meetings that have been approved, if the date of the week of evaluation that we're proposing has been approved, and if our date for reconsideration and deliberation has been approved. Interesting thing on that date, because of events for the last 2 years, we really need to have it done the end of July, because one, school's open, and we have not only teachers, but we have a lot of administrators, and those 2-3 weeks before school opens are critical for them to be able to be in their buildings to prepare for the new school year. And number two, we've had hurricanes. So if we go too late into August, we have hurricanes that we have to plan around and reschedule for. So that in a nutshell is our proposed 4-month timeline. We just don't have specific dates. Is there any questions?
Commissioner Hester, Commissioner Linker.
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to add it as just some input as a previous commissioner about just how important the reconsiderations are and the participation of all the textbook commissioners to add their input during that time. It's a real collaborative effort.
Yes, very good point. It is a collaborative process. When we go into that last deliberation, that's why it's called a deliberation, because we collaborate, we work together as we vote. But we come in with our individual reports beforehand. Did that make sense?
Yes, it did.
Are there any other questions? And for those of you that are newer to the process, it might seem like a lot, but like I said, again, this is just a big overview, and each meeting we have, the next 2 meetings, will break it down into more manageable chunks, especially once you get a chance to actually see the platform and have a better understanding of the tools that we have in place for that evaluation process. Let me tell you, it's come a long way in 16 years. When I first started the commission as a commission member, everything was paper pencil. The criteria sheets were legal size, front and back, at least 2 pages, 4 pages counting front and back. that we had to hand fill out for every submission and then write our responses in boxes. And then that was presented to the board. So we've come a long way in the process. A lot more in the last 2 to 3 years. Again, Dr. Fair's leadership has been tremendous in helping us modernize the process. Dr. Fair, Commissioner Gadet, for some reason, is now in attendees. I thought he was in participants earlier. I don't know if you can move him back up or not.
I just moved him.
Thank you. So again, that's just kind of it in a nutshell, kind of where we're going and what we're looking at. If you're a newer member, feel free to reach out to Dr. Fair, to myself, to the commission members in your region. I'm reminiscent in the fact that next time I will put down that we do a job. Maybe we need to take a minute to introduce ourselves so that we can see who is in our region. It is on the textbook adoption website. It has the members' names and the regions that we represent, so you could see who's in the same region as you. But that was one of the really great things about, one of the many great things about face-to-face, other than the fact that I'm a very social person and I miss face-to-face interaction, is the chance that you get a chance to put a face to a name and kind of form the relationship of the other commission members as you're coming on board. But we all work together as a team and help each other out. And so feel free to ask anyone. And then again, hopefully the Canvas course will offer another resource as you are looking back at your notes if you have any questions. That was one of the purposes for the course, to have everything in one spot. So I don't see any other questions. Dr. Fair, if you want to go to the next slide, which is really questions. So I don't think there are any questions, but I'll give everybody just a second. This slide gives us an opportunity to make sure that we do have, remember again, I hate to harp on it, but we really do need to have verbal participation from everybody so that we have documentation that everybody was an active participant. That's one of the new things that's because of virtual only. When you're face to face, you're obviously participating because you're raising your hand and people can see you raise your hand, and you're more, it's easily documented. We're on a live video screen. We can cut our cameras on. We can do that in the future if people want their cameras on. It's not currently set up. I don't know if you've noticed that the attorney was able to have her camera when she came in, but we can do that if that's something that you would be interested in doing in future meetings. If that is something that you would be interested in future meetings, feel free, if you'll just let Dr. Fair know, and we can look at the logistics to having everybody on a camera. It's something in the settings that needs to be set up. So does anybody want to, anything that you learned, anything you want to learn more about, anything you don't understand?
Commissioner Winger, this is Commissioner Gadet. I just want to make a point to say that it is important in terms of our quorum that we stay as best we can to the end of our meetings so that we keep our quorum and not lose it.
Can you repeat that? You broke up just a little bit. Not maybe it was just on my end.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I was just saying, Commissioner Cadet, I'll repeat again. I was just saying that it's important that when we are meeting we start with form, that we also end with it, as to make sure that we're able to fully take care of our business.
True. Good. That's a good point. So when we have a meeting, and maybe we didn't talk about it as much in detail, especially if we get close to quorum, we have to keep quorum for the entire meeting. Again, so there have been times when we've been in a face-to-face meeting of someone, if more than one person had to go out for a phone call, we've had to take a break. Because we have to have at least 12 people actively participating in the meeting at all times. That's part of public hearing laws. We call it Robert's rules. That's a requirement. If we have less than 12, we have to stop the meeting and cannot conduct the commission's business at that point. So that was a very good point, Commissioner Gadet. So this time, if we don't have any questions or feedback or comment, next steps. In a nutshell, because we kind of talked about next steps in the last slide. Next steps, we will meet in March. You were given an opportunity to pick between some dates and some times. Again, we picked the date that we had quorum because every time does not work for everyone. We did choose afternoons because that in the past, that has been the only time frame that we've had commitments where everyone could somewhat commit to. Mornings seem to, we've never had a morning poll, a poll where the morning options were at least 12 people were okay with. So we only included afternoon options. And also knowing that those of us that are educators and in schools, as more schools are opening up full time, some are in hybrid, some are virtual, and everybody's situation changes. It's very fluid, and we understand that. If you are a classroom teacher and you need a substitute to attend the meeting, just as if we had virtual meetings, you would just need to contact Dr. Fair. That's another reason for having afternoon meetings, because that allows you to fulfill your obligations. I know it's really hard in a virtual setting if you're in a virtual school, or even if you're face-to-face, to get a substitute in our current time and circumstances. And so that would allow you to, if you had to work in the morning, because you would get a sub for the afternoon, because you would get a half a day sub. So if you are a teacher or a support person who requires a sub to be absent from your job, then you would need to contact Dr. Fair so she can get you that information so that Department of Public Instruction would pick up the sub pay. And that is something that we had when we met face to face. We are also given the fluidity of the state that we're in. We also try to have the meetings in the afternoon and really try best to keep them to 2 hours, because I know that's a lot, asking a lot of time commitment with everything that's going on. So we gave the option between 1 and 3 and 2 to 4, and also keeping it in the afternoon, hoping that helps people who do need a sub, or who do not need a sub, but mornings just aren't good for if you're in a building, especially if you're in a building trying to get everything up and running for the day. So our next meeting will be in March. Between now and the next meeting, the Board of Education will meet to consider the invitation. So we will know in March, definitely, if we have timeline approved and if we're set to go for the summer, or if there's any proposed changes. The Board of Education always, of course, has the option of changing our suggested timeline And so we will have that information when we meet in March. And so be prepared when we meet in March to have some content, people, in case you have questions. If you feel like you need a review again of what we had 2 years ago, I'm sorry, this time last year, if you will let Dr. Fair know, because we are currently scheduled them for a shorter period of time, because you will have that information in a module to look over ahead of time. So we wanted to provide you with an opportunity to ask questions for clarification, one for the people that are newer to the board, and two, to be frankly, a year ago has seemed like a lifetime ago. And so even if you're not new to the board, you might not remember what happened last March. It's right before the world ended, as we knew it. So to give you that opportunity, we have already been trained. There's not a lot of changes in that training, but also to be cognizant of your time and not have you sit through a complete presentation that you might not need that information. So if you feel like you need a more in-depth time with the consultants, then if you would please reach out to Dr. Fair and let her know so we can adjust the schedule for when we ask those consultants to be available for the commission. Again, that would be the CTE divisions that handle CTE, the high school math courses that we're looking at. We will have someone from the EC and the EL, because we have criteria sheets designed specifically for that lens. We are also looking to have an introduction, a little more in depth of the platform from the TOPS support people. And we will start talking about advisors. We'll have the flyer. We'll know for sure if we're going to have to go to hire them, and talk about the process of getting that out and how that would be. That's our next big block of work as advisors. So if we don't have any questions or any concerns, I would entertain a motion to dismiss. And then we would need a second on that motion to adjourn.
Hi, Commissioner Roughton, motion to adjourn.
Commissioner Roughton presented a motion to adjourn. If I could have a second on that motion.
Commissioner Coggins,
Commissioner Cadet, second.
I think I heard Coggins first, so Commissioner Coggins has a second with a close tie for Commissioner Cadet. So we have a second. We're going to have Dr. Fair, if you can go through and call roll for approval.
Sure. Commissioner Laura Austin, Commissioner Jody Autry,
Commissioner Autry approved.
Commissioner Kelly Browning, Commissioner Megan Kennedy,
Commissioner Kennedy approved.
Commissioner William Chester,
Commissioner William Cheshire approved.
Commissioner Tony Coggins,
Commissioner Coggins approved.
Commissioner Hannah Cook, Commissioner Angela Flowers,
Commissioner Flowers approved.
Commissioner Aubrey Gadet,
Commissioner Cadet approved.
Commissioner Don Hester,
Commissioner Hester approves.
Commissioner Hannah Jimenez, Commissioner Renee Kimball, Commissioner Kathleen Linker,
Commissioner Linker approved.
Commissioner Amy Marshall,
Commissioner Marshall approved.
Commissioner Susan Mills, Commissioner Susan Mills.
I don't see her on the list anymore.
Okay. Commissioner Daniel Morris, Commissioner Stephen Parker,
Commissioner Parker approve.
Commissioner Michelle Perry,
And I don't see her on the list anymore.
Commissioner Kim Robertson, Commissioner Nardi Roughton,
Commissioner Roughton approved.
Commissioner Lindsay Seitz,
Commissioner Seitz approved.
Commissioner Rosalind Yaris. Okay, you're right at 12.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Commissioner Cadet, good point, because we are right at.
I was getting nervous, Commissioner Cadet. I was getting nervous over here.
Well, good point. So all 12 who are remaining have approved for the adjournment.
Thank you. And I thank you all for your commitment. This is a labor of love, definitely not a labor for monetary gain. There is no monetary gain. Until next time, have a safe and great month of February, and we'll see you in March.
Thank you.